What happens when the heart of America's industrial power simply stops beating Detroit? The city, once synonymous with steel cars and unstoppable production, has fallen silent. Not because of a global recession, not because of a supply chain collapse halfway across the world, but because of a single decision made in Washington. Detroit, once the beating heart of America's industrial empire, is now choking under the weight of tariffs that were supposed to save it. Instead of revival, what we see are silent assembly lines, shuttered plants, and families staring at pink slips. Billions in auto industry losses are not abstract numbers. They represent vanished paychecks and gutted communities. This isn't protection. It's self-sabotage. Canada, meanwhile, has executed a flawless pivot. While America stumbles, Ottawa has seized the chance to rebrand itself as the global leader in clean steel. European buyers are lining up. Asian partners are signing contracts, and Canada is cashing in on the very markets the U.S. once dominated. This isn't just trade realignment. It's a transfer of power. Washington has built a wall of tariffs. Canada is building bridges. And who pays the real price? Ordinary Americans. A car that once cost $25,000 now threatens to climb $6,000 and higher. A can of beans, a child stroller, even kitchen appliances. All marked up, squeezing household budgets already under siege. The average family is forced to choose groceries or gas, medicine or mortgage. Tariffs don't fall on China or Canada. They fall on every worker who thought their government had their back. Globally, the consequences are seismic. The EU and Asia are forging new alliances without the U.S. at the table. America, once the architect of global trade, now looks like the outsider pounding on locked doors. This is not mere policy failure. It is economic malpractice. A nation that once dictated the rules is now breaking itself with its own. The question that haunts us is chilling. If Detroit can collapse in months, what happens when the rest of America feels the same blow? When history looks back on this moment, it may see not just a policy misstep, but a turning point in America's economic decline. President Donald Trump's decision to levy 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, later doubled to 50%, was pitched as a bold defense of national security. In reality, it detonated a chain reaction of economic pain, igniting chaos in Detroit and reverberating into households across the country. The claim that prices tripled overnight may be an exaggeration, but the core truth is undeniable: costs surged, forecasts crumbled, and companies scrambled. General Motors reported $1.1 billion in tariff-related costs in the second quarter of 2025 alone. Stellantis projected losses between $120 and $1.80 to $8 billion for the year. These are not abstract figures. They are alarms ringing in the very center of America's industrial heart. Assembly lines slowed, shifts were cut, and thousands of workers were told to go home. Detroit, once the steel and fire engine of American power, now feels like a city watching its own obituary being drafted. Yet, the narrative of total collapse hides an even more dangerous truth. The industry has not died. It has been forced into a slow bleed. Automakers are absorbing costs temporarily. Stockpiles are cushioning the blow, and exemptions under the USMCA offer brief lifelines. But these are not solutions. They are bandages on a wound that keeps reopening each tariff announcement, tearing it wider. Meanwhile, Canada has turned defense into offense. When Ottawa retaliated with a 25% tariff on $21 billion worth of U.S. goods, it wasn't just hitting back, it was repositioning itself. Canada has branded its steel as clean, produced with hydroelectric power and marketed to an increasingly climate-conscious world. European buyers are listening. Asian markets are opening. By transforming retaliation into reinvention, Canada has seized a moral and economic high ground that Washington seems eager to abandon. But even here, the story has been exaggerated. Canada is no instant superpower. Its steel industry, worth $15 billion annually with half of it shipped south, cannot simply dominate Europe or Asia overnight. Shipping costs remain steep competition from Europe, and Asia remains fierce, and Canada itself has been hit with job losses and a record trade deficit in April 2025. Ottawa has momentum, but momentum alone is not dominance. For ordinary Americans, however, nuance is irrelevant when the bill comes due. A car once priced at $25,000 may now carry a $6,000 premium. According to Cox, automotive tariffs alone could add $5,000 to imported cars and $1,000 even to vehicles assembled on U.S. soil. Thin steel for cans, of which roughly 80% is imported, now costs more, driving up prices on everything from canned beans to baby formula. The Tax Foundation estimates that tariffs in 2025 equate to a $300 tax increase per household. Imagine the conversation at the dinner table. Do we skip the mortgage payment or do we skip the groceries? This is not macroeconomics. It is survival economics, and the global consequences are even sharper. Canada and the EU have moved closer together, reviving trade agreements once seen as symbolic, but now vital. Mexico, though quieter, has hinted at retaliation. Asian nations once bound to U.S. markets are hedging their bets with China and Europe. The Brookings Institution has noted a growing trend. Partners are diversifying away from Washington, not out of hatred, but out of fear. Fear of unpredictability of sudden tariffs calculated by formulas that feel like they were scribbled on the back of a napkin. Is the U.S. truly becoming isolated? Not yet. The American market remains vast, its consumer base unrivaled. Exemptions, carve-outs, and desperate negotiations have kept trade flowing under the USMCA and other deals. But the trajectory is undeniable. Every time Washington wields tariffs like a hammer, the rest of the world takes another step toward building a house without America inside it. What makes this crisis so perilous is not only the numbers, but the symbolism. Detroit's slowdown tells workers that their livelihoods are expendable. Rising grocery bills tell families that they are collateral damage. Canada's rise tells the world that alternatives to U.S. leadership exist. And Washington's unpredictability tells allies that loyalty may no longer be worth the cost. Still, rhetoric thrives on dichotomies. And here the video paints a stark one. America, the loser; Canada, the opportunist. On one side, U.S. workers with pink slips in hand. On the other, Ottawa rebranding itself as a global clean steel powerhouse. The framing is sharp, effective, and emotionally satisfying, but it hides a more complex reality. Canada's retaliatory tariffs aimed at $21 billion worth of U.S. goods inflicted pain on both sides. Canada itself wrestled with a record trade deficit in April 2025 and faced STET sector layoffs. Even as it positioned itself as the climate-conscious alternative, the neat binary of winner and loser dissolves under closer inspection. But for the purposes of persuasion, simplicity trumps complexity. Where the rhetoric truly lands is in its appeal to the human story. Laid-off workers, struggling families, grocery bills climbing higher with every trip to the store. These images cut deeper than any chart or balance sheet. And there is truth here. Tariffs have added up to $5,000 on imported cars and $1,000 even on U.S.-assembled vehicles, according to Cox Automotive. For Linda in Detroit or Miguel in Houston, these are not abstractions. They are the difference between paying the mortgage or skipping a meal. But again, the immediacy is exaggerated. Automakers have temporarily absorbed costs. Retailers have leaned on inventory. The pain is real, but not universal, not yet. The video also weaves nostalgia into its arsenal. Detroit, once a symbol of industrial dominance and resilience, is contrasted with images of silence and rust. This is a deliberate appeal to memory, to a time when American factories roared and paychecks were reliable. How could a city once so mighty now be reduced to this? The rhetorical strategy is powerful, almost poetic, but it risks blinding us to the resilience that still exists. Plants are wounded, not dead. Workers are strained, not vanished. The narrative of absolute decline makes for gripping viewing, but not for balanced policy debate. Every great crisis begins not with silence, but with exaggeration. Detroit, we are told, has collapsed. Assembly lines where silent steel prices tripled the auto industry in ruins. But reality is more complicated. But to declare an industrial funeral ignores key truths. Stockpiled inventory cushioned immediate shocks. Temporary exemptions under USMCA delayed harsher impacts and negotiations remain ongoing. Detroit is wounded but not buried, and yet Canada cast as the victor is hailed for its bold pivot to clean steel. It leveraged the crisis to position itself as a climate-friendly supplier. But the story amidst Canada's own pain steel sector layoffs and a record trade deficit in April 2025. Canada is not an invincible superpower. It is a nation improvising under fire just as vulnerable to global markets as its southern neighbor. The omissions are striking. U.S. policymakers attempted mitigation exemptions for USMCA-compliant parts, credits for domestic production tools designed to soften the blow. These efforts did not erase the pain, but they mattered by ignoring them. Even more concerning is the lack of sourcing. Figures like $14.20 to $15.88 billion in industry-wide losses are presented as gospel, yet without clear attribution. The claim that 80% of canned steel is imported, repeated with urgency, remains unsubstantiated. Fear thrives in the absence of clarity, and this video exploits that vacuum. At its core, the message is clear tariffs equal chaos, Canada equals salvation. But such a binary tale is political theater, not sober analysis. It vilifies U.S. protectionism while glossing over Canada's fragility. It elevates emotion while neglecting complexity. The irony is impossible to ignore. America's attempt to project dominance through tariffs has instead triggered a chain reaction of self-isolation. The network that once revolved around U.S. leadership is now being rebuilt into one where Washington no longer holds the reins. The trade war has proven itself to be more than just an economic misstep. Detroit, once the proud symbol of America's industrial might. A city that once embodied resilience has been reduced to a cautionary tale of how quickly power can unravel under inward-looking policies. Meanwhile, Ottawa has risen from the sidelines to seize a new position on the global stage. By branding itself as a supplier of clean steel, Canada has turned adversity into advantage, occupying the ground Washington ceded through miscalculation. Yet, the deeper cost is not measured in lost contracts or shrinking output, but in something far more damaging: the erosion of trust. Partners who once instinctively turned to the United States are now looking elsewhere, forging relationships that leave Washington on the outside. And here lies the danger. When narratives are stripped of nuanced citizens absorb spectacle instead of solutions, workers here collapse where there is strain. Families see doom where there is hardship. The truth is harsh enough: billions in losses, higher costs at the checkout line, allies seeking new alliances. But the greater tragedy may be that in chasing drama, we lose the capacity to see the fight as it truly is. Its role as a global anchor, a hub of trade and stability, is slowly slipping away. And the question now is this: will America continue down the path of isolation or pause before an entire generation of industry falls into the hands of its rivals? The lessons from Detroit, from Canada, and from the world's response still echo far beyond this moment in time. The video captures a hard truth. U.S. tariffs have rattled Detroit-inflated consumer costs and given Canada an opening to brand itself as a clean steel champion. Yet, its apocalyptic tone distorts reality. Detroit has not fallen into silence. It is straining under billions in losses while clinging to exemptions and stockpiled inventory. Canada, too, carries its own wounds, job cuts, and a swelling trade deficit. The real danger lies in the narrative itself. By amplifying collapse and ignoring nuance, it risks misleading Americans at the very moment they most need clarity. The question remains, who pays the final?